Another day, another story. Are you a logical, precise thinker, or would you say that you're more free-spirited and artistic? If you're the former, somebody's probably told you at some point that you're a left-brained person. And if you're the latter, right-brained. The notion that the right half of the brain is the creative half, and the left half is the analytical half, and that our individual traits are determined by which half is dominant, is widespread in popular psychology. There's even a small industry devoted to this idea. Welcome to Tabo Eminent Channel. There are self-help books, personality tests, therapies, and educational materials that claim to help you optimize the functions of the stronger half of your brain, get in touch with the weaker half, or even make the two halves stop their, supposedly, incessant battling inside your skull so you can finally get some peace and quiet. The idea that there are right-brained and left-brained people is a myth. Although we all obviously have different personalities and talents, there's no reason to believe these differences can be explained by the dominance of one half of the brain over the other half. Recent research using brain imaging technology hasn't found any evidence of right or left dominance. One of the myth's fatal flaws is that it relies on vague conceptions of the abilities it purports to explain. Math, for example, requires logical thought, and thus is generally said to reside in the left brain, far away from all those artsy right brain abilities. But mathematics is a profoundly creative endeavor, in addition to being a logical one. So would a gifted mathematician be a right-brained person or a left-brained person? Likewise, artistic creativity isn't just unbridled emotion. Many of the greatest works of art are products of rigorous, precise thought. Like many modern myths, the myth of right-brained and left-brained people is rooted in a bit of real science. We know the right and left sides of the brain actually do specialize in different kinds of tasks, although the real division of labor is much more complex than creativity on the right and logic on the left. Much of our knowledge in this area comes from the study of so-called split brain patients. In the 1940s, doctors discovered that by surgically severing the corpus callosum, the bundle of nerve fibers that connects the two hemispheres of the brain, seizures could be reduced in patients with otherwise unmanageable epilepsy. The procedure is seldom performed today because new drugs and treatments have been developed. After the operation, the patients had normal intellectual and emotional functioning and seemed to have only mild impairments. More thorough examinations, though, revealed specific disruptions in perception and cognition that illuminated how the two halves of the brain differ from each other and how they cooperate. Generally, the right hemisphere of the brain was found to be more proficient at spatial tasks, while the left side of the brain was found to be the center of language and problem solving. If there's no evidence for the myth of right-brained and left-brained people, why do so many people believe it? Perhaps it just makes intuitive sense that people's brains would be dominant on one side or the other, just as their hands, feet, or eyes are. It may also have something to do with our seemingly unlimited appetite for schemes that allow us to sort ourselves, and our friends, into types based on our emotional and intellectual characteristics. Most of these, the Myers-Briggs personality test for example, have about as much scientific validity as horoscopes, but they exploit a psychological phenomenon known as the Barnum effect, or sometimes the Forer effect. When people are offered generic descriptive statements that are presented as individualized descriptions of their own personalities, they are predisposed to accept them as meaningful and true, especially if the statements are positive. The psychologists who studied this phenomenon gave out fake personality tests and found that people generally rated the bogus feedback as accurate. The right brain, left brain myth works in a similar way. The insights that it generates are both generic and flattering. After all, who would reject a description of themselves as spontaneous and intuitive, or rational and analytical? The myth is popular in the end because it gives us a scientific way to talk about our favorite subject, ourselves. The concept of right-brained and left-brained people is largely a myth. This idea suggests that people have a dominant side of their brain that determines their personality and cognitive style, with right-brained individuals being more creative and intuitive, and left-brained individuals being more analytical and logical. However, modern neuroscience has debunked this oversimplification. Here are some key points to understand. Brain lateralization. It is true that certain functions are lateralized, meaning they are more dominant in one hemisphere of the brain than the other. For example, language abilities are typically localized in the left hemisphere for right-handed individuals, while spatial abilities are often associated with the right hemisphere. Interconnectedness. Despite these specializations, the two hemispheres of the brain are highly interconnected. They communicate through a bundle of fibers called the corpus callosum, allowing them to work together in almost all cognitive tasks. No personality division. Extensive research has shown that cognitive functions and personality traits are not confined to one hemisphere. Both sides of the brain are involved in nearly all activities, from logical reasoning to creative thinking. Neuroplasticity. The brain is highly adaptable and capable of reorganizing itself. This plasticity means that functions can shift and adjust, undermining the notion of fixed right or left brain dominance. Scientific consensus. Numerous studies, including neuroimaging research, have demonstrated that complex cognitive processes engage multiple areas across both hemispheres. These findings contradict the simplistic division of people into right-brained and left-brained categories. The notion of right-brained versus left-brained people originated from early neuroscientific research, particularly the work of Roger W. Sperry, who won the Nobel Prize in 1981 for his studies on split-brain patients. Sperry's experiments in the 1960s involved patients who had undergone surgery to sever the corpus callosum, a procedure intended to treat severe epilepsy. This surgery effectively isolated the two hemispheres of the brain from one another. Sperry and his colleagues found that when the connection between the hemispheres was cut, the two sides of the brain could no longer communicate. This led to fascinating observations about the specialization of each hemisphere. For instance, in most right-handed individuals, the left hemisphere was found to be responsible for language and analytical tasks, while the right hemisphere was better at spatial and creative tasks. These findings were groundbreaking and contributed significantly to our understanding of brain function. Furthermore, complex cognitive functions such as problem-solving, emotional regulation, and creative thinking engage networks of regions across both hemispheres. The brain's incredible plasticity also allows it to adapt and reorganize, which means that functions are not rigidly fixed in one hemisphere. One striking example of the brain's adaptability is seen in individuals who have undergone a hemispherectomy, a surgical procedure in which one hemisphere of the brain is removed or disabled to treat severe epilepsy. Despite losing half of their brain, many of these individuals can lead relatively normal lives, with the remaining hemisphere compensating for the lost functions. In conclusion, while the idea of right-brained and left-brained people is a compelling story, it doesn't hold up to scientific scrutiny. The brain's hemispheres are interdependent and collaborate on a wide range of tasks. Our cognitive abilities and personalities are shaped by complex interactions within the entire brain, not by dominance of one hemisphere over the other. This holistic understanding of brain function emphasizes the importance of viewing the brain as a dynamic and integrated system capable of remarkable flexibility and resilience. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel.